Step 4. Engage in the healing process by making a searching and fearless written moral inventory of ourselves. Section 3. Learning to identify, feel, and process each emotion. How emotions trigger our addiction. In this section, we gain the insight to see how our emotions are directly connected to our addictive behaviors. Whenever uncomfortable emotions arise, we feel the need to escape into false promises of relief by acting out in our addictive behaviors. As a sister explained, quote, "I felt the only way I could feel good was to experience the high of acting out. Sadly, I perceived it as my only source of happiness. At the time, I didn't recognize that I was only numbing the heavy shame that was suffocating my soul." Close quote. However potent the numbing effect of our addiction may be, it will only keep our uncomfortable feelings at bay for a limited time. After acting out in our addictive behaviors, toxic emotions such as shame and despair resurface, and the damaging cycle to escape our feelings continues. We now recognize why experts have identified addiction as an emotional, physical, and spiritual disease. Our participation in our addiction has become a drug to take away emotional pain, to cope with stress, to manage difficult circumstances in life, and perhaps even as a reward for some achievement. Therefore, understanding that our emotions can trigger our compulsions makes it clear that learning to manage our emotions will strengthen our recovery. The fear of honestly engaging with our feelings can be challenging at first because our addicted brain is preconditioned to respond to emotional discomfort by initiating what has always been our default solution, that of acting out in our addiction. As we started down the path of abstinence, we felt a wide range of uncomfortable emotions and in turn felt tempted to escape them. As a result, our emotions became powerful triggers to entice us to numb out yet again. However, as we continue to maintain abstinence, we begin to reconnect, embrace, and work through newly developing feelings. For honestly examining our feelings helps us heal from addiction. The wedge in our relationships. As our addiction escalates, we tend to isolate more and more from loved ones, leading to emotional disconnection. The fact is, the longer an addictive illness progresses, the less we have the ability to have meaningful relationships with others. Our addiction provides a counterfeit emotional connection and ultimately becomes our primary emotional relationship. Because we experience a mood change, we start to believe our emotional needs have been met. This is an illusion. As the numbing cycle of addiction continues to grow stronger, we risk becoming emotionally hollow. When we continue to rely on our addiction to escape, we become susceptible to developing an attachment disorder. This is a condition in which individuals have difficulty forming lasting relationships. Although we desire to connect with others, we are simply unable to do so because our current emotional attachment is to our addiction. It is important to understand that all human beings are biologically hardwired to need people. Yet continuing to act out in our addiction threatens our ability to satisfy this fundamental need. Learning to feel our emotions and develop connections with others is possible and important because neglecting to do so leaves us in danger of relapse. Creating such emotional attachments begins in the non-judgmental, compassionate, empathetic environment of support group meetings. It is there that we begin to experience full acceptance. As we find trust and connection in support groups, we become prepared to emotionally reach out to others. Elder David A. Bednar taught that without engaging our emotions with others, quote, important opportunities are missed for developing and improving interpersonal skills, for laughing and crying together, and for creating a rich and enduring bond of emotional intimacy, close quote. Even though we may not want to face our emotions, to be emotionless is to be disconnected, indifferent, and basically unavailable for relationships. Each emotion has its own valid place in our lives. Doing an inventory on the emotions that we struggle with the most and learning how to process them will strengthen our recovery efforts and help us protect when emotional pain threatens to take us down the road of relapse. The Lord understands the emotional roots of our addictive behavior, and if we rely upon His guidance, He will help us to properly embrace all our emotions. Learning to feel again. It is important to note that the age at which our addiction began is the age that our emotional development stopped. Although we may stay trapped in an emotionally adolescent stage as long as our addiction is in progress, it is reassuring to know, as we continue to work recovery, we will generate spiritual healing and emotional maturity. As we surrender our emotional struggles to Christ, He will respond with comfort and empathy, for He too experienced our painful emotions as well as His own and fully understands what we are going through. Still, learning to feel again can be quite painful, much like restoring blood flow to a numb limb. The subsequent pins and needles can sometimes feel unsettling and even unbearable. Additionally, there are sure to be many conflicting emotions that emerge early in recovery. First is profound grief, which reflects anger and sadness at the losses caused by the addiction. As we begin this stage of recovery, we learn to embrace our feelings, to process them, and develop healthy coping skills that will provide a full and meaningful life. Our emotions will need to be named accurately if we want to transform how we feel. We have to know what we feel. Indeed, there is a full spectrum of human emotions, and when we numb the dark, we also numb the light. In other words, if we try to blot out our anger, we will blot out happiness and serenity along with it. Feeling all of our emotions and learning to process each of them allows us to live in personal truth and authenticity. However, when we suppress our emotions, they are still in there, desperate to be released, to be validated. Clearly, ignoring our feelings doesn't make them go away. It makes them get bigger, or come out in strange, unpredictable, and often undesirable ways. Recognizing our emotions becomes less intimidating when we practice mindfulness, which is being aware of and observing our thoughts and feelings from a non-judgmental perspective. Permitting ourselves to actually feel and give voice to our emotions helps to decrease our shame, allowing us to grow into emotional honesty and integrity. Although feeling new and unfamiliar emotions can be frightening at first, leaning into the discomfort affords us the ability to move through them. Throughout our life, there will be times when we will face difficult and painful circumstances. Even when this happens, we can learn to live life on life's terms without having to run from or suppress our emotions. As we begin to awaken from our emotional coma, we can give ourselves permission to acknowledge and accept whatever emotion may surface, no matter how uncomfortable they make us feel. And by so doing, we can begin to find more peace, happiness, and fulfillment as we learn how to process through them. However, as we continue on our emotional journey, we must ask ourselves, are we merely surviving our feelings, or are we thriving by learning to appreciate the proper role they play in our lives? Our end goal is to allow ourselves to feel all emotions as God intended, so that we may become emotionally whole. Taking responsibility for our emotions. We are better able to love our emotional selves when we accept that experiencing uncomfortable emotions is not something we need to feel ashamed of, but that it is a normal part of our human experience. Sometimes we aren't able to connect consciously with our feelings. Time and behavioral changes will rectify that as we go on. Our commitment often appears in bits and pieces along the recovery highway, but it will materialize if we continue with honest effort, faith, and sobriety. In order to progress, we must honestly acknowledge our feelings rather than conceal, stuff, or deny them, striving to recognize that our feelings are our responsibility. We avoid blaming our emotions on others, letting our feelings control us, and trying to control others with our feelings. Facing and owning our emotions is necessary so that we may move forward in our recovery, for they have a great guiding purpose in our life. So if we lose contact with them or misperceive them, we get lost quickly. We will need the Lord's help to courageously face our unsettling emotions. We can stop and pray for understanding of what we are feeling, as well as continue to discuss our emotions with our sponsor. We can even ask for help identifying what we are feeling and actively share how uncertain and unclear we are about those feelings. Additionally, we learn to listen to others in our support group as they share what they are feeling, noting how similar our own emotions are to theirs. Processing our emotions, feel it to heal it. Trying to function with a very limited number of emotions hampers our capacity to respond appropriately to many life circumstances. Because our feelings have been suppressed, we often cannot even identify them. We will be flooded with emotions, but have no awareness of where these feelings come from. However, over time, as we learn to acknowledge and process our emotions, true acceptance of ourselves will begin to grow. Even though it may seem that we are completely incapable of managing our emotions, we simply have not yet learned how to do so. We have not yet learned the tools that will set us free. A simple process of how to work through our emotions might be to do the following. 1. Keep an emotional list to help us become consciously aware and mindful of what emotions we are feeling at any given moment. A few examples are sadness, grief, disappointment, anxiety, anger, rage, fear, hatred, loneliness, guilt, shame, happiness, and surprise. 2. Strive to identify what thoughts, experiences, or circumstances led to the triggering of these emotions. 3. Become willing to lean into each emotion, listen to it, and learn what it is trying to tell us. We can start small by simply jotting down the emotions we feel at various times throughout the day. If we find ourselves caught up in a whirlwind of uncomfortable emotions, we can pause, take a deep breath, and ask ourselves what we are feeling right now and what we need. By looking inside ourselves, we may recognize that we had more vulnerable feelings, such as feeling hurt, unwanted, or ashamed. These primary feelings give us a glimpse into our needs. When we allow ourselves to get in touch with them, we can then express them to others. Every emotion is necessary and serves a purpose in our lives. We become willing to feel our emotions and appreciate their purpose rather than avoiding them, for all emotions are damaging if you imprison them, just as all emotions are healing when you channel them honorably. By learning to appreciate all emotions, they can help us improve our circumstances and bring us into a state of wholeness. The benefit of learning to feel again is that it actually strengthens our recovery. As a brother shared, quote, "It was only through processing my emotions and not turning to my addiction to avoid them that I started to heal. I began to recognize that learning from my emotional weakness was part of the strength that allowed me to recover. Of course, reaching out to my Savior and others for help and support were essential too." Close quote. It is when we become able to hear and respond to our emotions effectively that we become able to understand the deepest language of our souls. The spiritual promise of Step 4, Section 3. Although processing through our emotions may be challenging, our Savior desires to help us through every aspect of our recovery. When we struggle with a need we cannot fill, a weakness we cannot conquer, a hurt or emotional wound that is festering because we cannot heal it ourselves, then we are the one He is looking for. Come to the Shepherd, accept His invitation. He is waiting with open arms to receive us. Prayer and meditation can also enhance our emotional awareness. Ultimately, the purest source of emotional healing comes when we feel love, compassion, and empathy from our Savior, Jesus Christ. Remember the words of the Savior Himself, "I am the Good Shepherd, and I know my sheep." Our Redeemer knows what comfort and relief we need right now, not only in this very moment, but in every moment. He understands the emotional struggle we are experiencing. It is through the atonement He felt every insecurity, frustration, anxiety, pressure, and pain associated with mortality, and now stands ready and willing to assist us when we feel those emotions. When we are overcome by our feelings, we can surrender and release them to our Savior, and He can provide the understanding and peace we need. Although we often feel emotionally broken, the Lord will always respond to our plea for help, as Elder Jeffrey R. Holland testified, quote, "If you are lonely, please know you can find comfort. If you are discouraged, please know you can find hope. If you are poor in spirit, please know you can be strengthened. If you are broken, please know you can be mended." Close quote.